You have had fingerprints since before you were born. By the time you were 17 weeks old in the womb, before you could hear, before your eyes could open, before almost any of the systems we associate with being human were functional, the patterns on your fingertips were already fully formed. And they will never change. They will look the same on the day you die as they did in the womb. No injury, no aging, no amount of time will alter them, short of permanent scarring of the skin itself. Most people, if you ask them why we have fingerprints, would say something about identification, crime scenes, passports, phone unlocking. But that's what humans did with fingerprints. It's not why we evolved them. The real answer involves ancient forests, the mathematics of animal stripes, a marsupial that has no biological connection to us, and a 2023 discovery that rewrote what scientists thought they understood about how fingerprints form in the first place. Until 2023, how fingerprints formed in the womb was genuinely not well understood. Scientists knew when it happened. They knew the general outcome. But the precise cellular and molecular mechanism, how a smooth patch of developing skin turns into a specific pattern of ridges and whorls, remained unclear. Then, Dennis Hedden, a developmental biologist at the University of Edinburgh, published a landmark paper in the journal Cell that cracked it open. The process begins around week 10 of fetal development. The cells in the basal layer of the skin on the fingertip, the deepest layer, begin dividing faster than the layers above them. Because the deeper layer is growing but the upper layer isn't expanding at the same rate, the skin has nowhere to go but to buckle. It folds, and as it folds, it forms ridges. What controls the specific pattern of those ridges, the loops, whorls, and arches that make your fingerprint uniquely yours, turned out to be a system of 3 molecular signals: EDAR, WNT, and BMP. These molecules interact with each other in a specific way. One activates a region, another spreads the signal outward, and a third acts as an inhibitor, turning the signal off at a certain distance. The result is a self-organizing wave pattern. Hedon's team discovered that these waves of ridge formation start from 3 separate points on each fingertip simultaneously, from beneath the nail, from the center of the finger pad, and from the crease at the first joint. The waves expand outward and eventually collide. The specific shape of each fingerprint is determined by exactly how and where those 3 expanding wave fronts meet and interfere with each other. This is why fingerprints are unique. The 3-way collision is influenced by the precise geometry of the fingertip at the moment of formation, the position of the fetus, the pressure of surrounding fluid, tiny variations in timing, hundreds of microscopic variables that produce an outcome no 2 people will ever share, not even identical twins. Here's the detail that makes this discovery remarkable beyond fingerprints alone. The molecular system Hedden's team identified, one activator, one that spreads the signal, one inhibitor, follows a mathematical framework first described in 1952 by Alan Turing. Yes, the same Alan Turing who broke the Enigma code and laid the theoretical foundations of computing. In one of the last papers before his death, Turing proposed a mathematical model for how chemical signals could interact and spread to produce ordered patterns in nature: stripes, spots, alternating bands. At the time, it was largely theoretical. Biologists didn't know what chemicals were doing the signaling or in which organisms. But over the following decades, Turing reaction diffusion systems were identified in the formation of leopard spots, zebra stripes, the spacing of hair follicles, and the branching patterns of teeth. The same underlying mathematics, in different molecular implementations, seems to generate pattern after pattern in living systems. Fingerprints are now confirmed to be another instance of the same principle. When Hayden's team adjusted the levels of the key molecules, turning the EDAR signal up and down, increasing or decreasing BMP, the patterns changed in exactly the way Turing's equations predicted. More EDAR produced wider, more widely spaced ridges. Decreasing it produced spots rather than stripes, another Turing signature. Your fingerprints run on the same mathematics that makes a tiger striped. It's a piece of physics running repeatedly in biology at every scale, in almost every species. Now for the evolutionary question: why did this pattern develop? What do fingerprints actually do? There are 3 serious hypotheses, and they're not mutually exclusive. The oldest and most intuitive explanation is grip. Fingerprint ridges create friction between the fingertip and a surface. allowing us to hold things more securely. This has long seemed like the obvious answer, so obvious that for decades many scientists simply assumed it without rigorous testing. When researchers at the University of Manchester actually measured it, the results were more complicated. The ridges do reduce total skin contact area compared to a smooth fingertip, which should, by basic physics, reduce friction. On smooth surfaces, fingerprints were found not to significantly increase friction at all. However, on rough and textured surfaces, and critically on wet surfaces, the ridges appear to act more like the treads on a tire, channeling moisture away from the contact point, maintaining a drier, more functional grip in rain or humid conditions. A 2020 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences confirmed this moisture regulation function directly, showing that fingerprint ridges actively manage sweat and external moisture to optimize grip in challenging conditions. The second hypothesis, and the one with some of the most compelling modern evidence, is touch sensitivity. Fingerprint ridges appear to act as mechanical amplifiers. When a ridged fingertip moves across a textured surface, it generates vibrations at frequencies that are specifically detected by Meissner's corpuscles, specialized mechanoreceptors in the skin that are among the most sensitive touch receptors in the human body. A 2009 study found that ridged fingertips generated vibrations up to 100 times stronger at certain frequencies than smooth fingertips would produce on the same surface. In practical terms, this means fingerprints allow you to feel textures, surfaces, and object properties in extraordinary detail that would be unavailable to a smooth fingertip. The ability to assess texture by touch is thought to have been evolutionarily important for early primates, allowing them to assess fruit ripeness, evaluate surfaces for grip before committing weight, and manipulate small objects with precision. Researchers have specifically proposed what they call the fruit texture hypothesis, that the sensitivity enabled by fingerprint ridges was a key adaptation in early arboreal primates navigating environments where touch-based assessment of food quality was a daily survival task. The third hypothesis, proposed by Roland Enos of the University of Hull, is more structural, that fingerprint ridges may reinforce the skin of the fingertip against blistering by allowing it to flex in some directions while resisting tearing in others, a principle similar to the reinforcement structure in a tire. This remains less studied than the other two, but it hasn't been ruled out. Here is one of the most striking facts in all of fingerprint research. Koalas have fingerprints. Not similar fingerprints, virtually identical fingerprints, the same loops, arches, and whorls at the same scale, in the same positions on the fingertips as human prints. They are so close that in early forensic cases where koala prints were found at crime scenes, they were genuinely misidentified as human. Koalas are marsupials. They share a common ancestor with humans, but that ancestor lived approximately 70 to 80 million years ago, long before fingerprints appear in the fossil record of either lineage. This means koalas and humans did not inherit fingerprints from the same source. They evolved them independently on separate branches of the evolutionary tree, arriving at nearly identical structures through completely different paths. This is one of the most compelling examples of convergent evolution in biology, where different species, under similar selective pressures, independently arrive at the same solution. Koalas are arboreal animals. They climb trees, grip branches, and manipulate bark and eucalyptus leaves with their fingers. The selective pressures are almost exactly the same as those faced by our primate ancestors: grip, moisture management, and fine touch on rough, irregular, often wet surfaces. The fact that evolution produced essentially the same fingerprint structure twice, independently in species separated by 80 million years, is about as strong an argument as you can get that fingerprints are genuinely useful. That whatever they're doing, it works well enough to be worth the biological cost of developing and maintaining them. One final question. Why are fingerprints unique to each individual? Why didn't evolution simply produce the same pattern in everyone? The answer, as Hayden's research helps explain, is that the uniqueness is a side effect of the formation process, not a design goal. The Turing reaction diffusion system that generates fingerprint ridges is sensitive to initial conditions in a way that makes identical outcomes essentially impossible, even between genetically identical people. Identical twins share the same DNA, the same molecular instructions for ridge formation, the same 3 starting points for wave expansion, and yet they have completely different fingerprints. The precise moment each wave starts, the exact geometry of the fingertip at that moment, the pressure of surrounding amniotic fluid, tiny temperature variations. All of these infinitesimal differences send the pattern in different directions. It's the same reason that snowflakes are unique. The underlying physics is identical. The rules don't change. But the specific path each one takes through its environment as it forms is never exactly repeated. Humans didn't evolve unique fingerprints because uniqueness was selected for. We ended up with unique fingerprints because the system that generates them is, by its mathematical nature, extraordinarily sensitive to the physical conditions at the moment of formation. Every person's womb environment is slightly different. That's enough. You have used your fingerprints today, probably hundreds of times, gripping a cup, running a thumb across a surface, unlocking a phone, touching something to find out what it felt like. Each of those interactions involved a piece of biological engineering that is millions of years old, independently reinvented by at least one other species, generated in the womb by the same mathematics that stripes a tiger, and completely unique to you in the history of every person who has ever lived. That seems like a lot of engineering for something most people think of as a tool for crime scenes. If you found this interesting, there's more like it coming. See you in the next one.